Vanessa Sinclair's arrogance hit Troy Harrison's steel wall of silence when she fired him on a cold February night. In her fancy office overlooking the Chicago harbor, Vanessa insulted the 36-year-old black supervisor, treating him like he was worthless. She made this cruel decision because Troy's logs threatened to expose the $1.85 million she stole through Zenith. Troy only wanted to protect his dignity, secure his daughter Chloe's future, and expose the truth through an independent audit. His journey begins as powerful people use lies to destroy his name. Will Vanessa keep her winning smile when the truth about Troy's real family is revealed? Right after those cruel words left her mouth, Vanessa spun her leather chair back toward the harbor lights. She did not even glance at him again. The clock on her wall read 8:47 p.m. A thin folder of termination papers sat under Troy's left arm, the paper gone soft from the heat of his own skin. Behind her desk, a space heater hummed, filling the room with dry warmth. Out in the hallway, the air turned sharp and cold within a few steps. Troy walked past the security desk without a word. His work boots left wet prints across the polished marble floor. Nobody in the front office looked up from their screens. A phone rang twice somewhere down the hall, then stopped. The scent of expensive cologne and cold coffee lingered near the elevator bank. Troy pressed the button and waited, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the closing doors. Outside, the Chicago wind cut through his jacket like a blade. Rain had turned to sleet against the street lights, ticking softly on the pavement. His old black SUV sat alone in the far corner of the lot, 19 days since the heater had stopped working. Troy climbed in and gripped the cold steering wheel with both hands. His jaw locked tight. A vein pulsed once at his temple, then went still. He did not curse. He did not cry. He breathed out slow, like a man setting down a heavy box he had carried too long. The dashboard clock read 9:03. He turned the key, and the engine coughed twice before catching. Cold air blasted through the vents instead of warm air, and Troy flipped the switch off with a tired flick of his wrist. He pulled out of the lot, tires hissing against the wet asphalt. Streetlights blurred past the windshield in long yellow streaks. He drove 11 blocks to 2432 Oak Street, past the shuttered laundromat and the diner with the flickering neon sign. Mrs. Gable stood on her porch, holding his daughter's small hand under a dim yellow bulb. 6-year-old Chloe wore mismatched socks, one pink and one striped, and a backpack shaped like a ladybug. "Daddy!" she yelled and ran straight into his legs, nearly knocking him backward. Troy scooped her up, and her cold nose pressed into his neck. He smelled her strawberry shampoo mixed with the damp smell of rain on wool. For 1 second, the weight in his chest disappeared completely. Mrs. Gable smiled and waved a wrinkled hand from the porch. "She ate all her dinner," Mrs. Gable said. "Green beans and everything." "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," Troy said, forcing warmth into his tired voice. "I owe you. You owe me nothing," she answered. "That girl is a joy." "How was work?" Chloe asked, yawning against his shoulder as he carried her to the car. "Work was fine, baby girl," Troy said. His voice stayed calm and even careful not to let a single crack show. He did not tell her the truth. Not yet. He buckled her into the back seat and wrapped her in the only blanket that still smelled clean. The heater rattled, but blew no warm air at all. Chloe's breathing turned into a soft wheeze halfway home, a thin whistling sound that made Troy's chest tighten. His knuckles went white on the wheel. Her asthma medicine cost $312, $50 a month. The bottle in his glove box was almost empty, maybe 4 doses left. Rent was due in 6 days. $1,450, and he now had 0 income coming in. Troy pulled into their apartment lot and carried Chloe upstairs, still asleep against his shoulder, her breath warm through his shirt. He laid her down gently on her small bed and pulled the blanket to her chin. The nightlight in the corner threw a soft glow across her round cheeks. Then he sat alone at the kitchen table. The refrigerator hummed its usual tired hum. A pipe knocked twice somewhere in the wall, then went quiet. Troy opened his laptop, an old silver one, with a cracked corner held together with tape. The screen took its time waking up, casting a pale blue light across his tired face. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the small clock on the stove. It read 11:45 p.m. Chloe would be up again in 7 hours, hungry for pancakes and cartoons, expecting the same steady father she always saw. Troy pressed his thumb against a small dent in the table, a scratch left by Chloe's fork months earlier. He almost smiled at the memory, then let it fade as the laptop finished loading. He plugged in a small USB drive, the kind you could buy for $10 at any drugstore. It held backup copies of every maintenance log from the last 11 months. Numbers, repair dates, vendor invoices. Boring stuff, most people would say. But Troy had written every line himself, by hand first, in a cheap notebook, then typed at night, after Chloe fell asleep. As the screen loaded, a red warning flashed across it. A remote deletion command was running on the Apex Horizon server, right at that exact moment. Someone was erasing the original files from Vanessa Sinclair's own login. Troy's stomach dropped. He leaned closer to the screen, his pulse suddenly loud in his own ears. If those files vanished before Monday, so would every trace of Zenith maintenance systems. So would every trace of the $1, 852, 410, 95 that had quietly disappeared from the maintenance budget over 11 straight months. Troy was the only person alive with a saved copy of the truth. He stared at the screen until his eyes burned and blurred. Then he closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the pipes tick as they cooled. Part of him wanted to walk away. Vanessa had money. She had lawyers on retainer. She had already called him a warehouse boy who doesn't know his place. She said it in front of 2 other managers, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. If Troy pushed back, she could accuse him of stealing company files. That could mean jail time. That could mean losing Chloe to the state. He looked toward her bedroom door, just a thin crack of hallway light showing under it. His hands trembled slightly on the table, fingers curling into loose fists. Then they went still, steady as stone. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice in the alley, then silence returned. There was one number he had promised never to use, not even in his worst year. A private line connected to something called the Harrison Legacy Trust, set up quietly by his late father before he passed. Troy had sworn, years ago, standing at his father's grave, that he would build his own life without ever touching it. He was proud of that promise. It meant something to him, more than any paycheck ever could. But promises meant nothing if Chloe got hurt because of his pride. He sat with that thought until the kitchen window turned gray, with early light, the first birds starting their quiet chatter outside. He thought about applying somewhere else, maybe a loading dock across town, somewhere far from Vanessa's reach. It would be simple, quiet, safe. But every time he pictured it, he saw Artie's tired face and the workers who still trusted the numbers Troy had written down for years. Walking away meant leaving all of them exposed too. He rubbed his tired eyes and finally closed them, resting his head on folded arms at the table. Saturday morning, Troy drove to a small diner near the docks called the Rusty Anchor. Steam fogged the front windows completely. The smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease filled the narrow space. A bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside, stomping rain from his boots. Arthur Higgins sat alone in a corner booth, 71 years old, hands scarred from decades of machine work at the terminal. Everyone at the docks called him Artie. Vanessa had forced him into early retirement 2 months earlier just to cut his health benefits from the company budget. "Sit down, Troy," Artie said, sliding a battered notebook across the sticky table. Its cover was cracked and taped at one corner, the pages yellowed with age. "This is everything. Every time they made me sign off on repairs, that never actually happened." Artie's voice dropped low, almost a whisper. "They think men like us don't have a voice, Troy. You've got that USB drive. Don't let your silence become their alibi." Troy opened the notebook slowly, careful with the fragile pages. Row after row of handwritten dates filled the paper. Fake invoice numbers. A pattern stretching back almost a full year. His throat tightened as he read his old friend's shaky, careful handwriting. Artie had kept quiet for months out of fear of losing his pension. Now he wasn't afraid anymore. His eyes, pale blue and steady, met Troy's across the table. "Whatever you're planning," Artie said, "I'm already in it. Every step." A waitress refilled their coffee, without being asked, the pot clinking softly against the thick diner mugs. Troy wrapped both hands around his cup, letting the heat soak into his cold fingers. Outside, rain kept tapping the glass in a slow, steady rhythm. "Vanessa thinks nobody's watching," Troy said quietly. "She's wrong. She's always been wrong," Artie replied. "She just never got caught before." Artie leaned back against the cracked vinyl booth, folding his scarred hands on the table. "You know what she called me the day she pushed me out? She said I was outdated equipment. 31 years I gave that terminal. 31 years, Troy." Troy said nothing for a moment, just watched steam curl off his coffee. "You're not outdated, Artie. You're the only one who kept the real records." Artie's eyes softened. "Your father would be proud of you, son. I mean that." He tapped the notebook once with a scarred finger. "Use it well." That afternoon, Troy walked 3 blocks to an old red phone booth near the train station. It was one of the last working ones left in the city. Rain tapped the glass in small, steady beats, blurring the streetlights into soft yellow smears. He dialed a number he had memorized as a teenager and never once used. It rang twice. "Harrison Trust, this is Cassius," a calm, measured voice answered on the other end. Troy's chest tightened. "Cassius, it's Troy. I need to activate the Vanguard oversight protocol." There was a pause, long enough that Troy wondered if the call had dropped. "You understand what this means, Troy?" Cassius finally said. "Your name goes public. Every board member at Vanguard Global Holdings will know exactly who you are." "I understand," Troy said, his voice steady despite the cold shaking his hands. "Send an independent audit team to the Midwest terminal. Monday morning, first thing." "And Vanessa Sinclair?" Cassius asked. "Let the evidence speak for itself," Troy said. "It's time to clean house." The call lasted 5 minutes and 14 seconds exactly. When Troy hung up, his hand was shaking against the cold metal receiver, but his mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. He stepped out of the booth, into the rain, and stood there a moment, letting it soak through his jacket. Monday, before dawn, Vanessa Sinclair noticed something strange on her tablet. A surprise audit notice had landed in her inbox, sent directly from the parent company. Her manicured fingers froze over the screen. Someone above her had triggered it, and she had absolutely no idea who. Her coffee went cold on the desk beside her, untouched. She called Security Chief Leo Marsh into her office and slammed her palm flat on the polished desk. The sound echoed off the glass walls. "Find out who leaked information to corporate," she snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "And find that USB drive." Troy Harrison walked out with Friday night. Leo nodded once and left without asking a single question. He had worked for Vanessa a long time. He knew better than to ask why a fired warehouse supervisor mattered so much to a woman like her. Vanessa paced her office once the door shut, heels clicking sharp against the tile. She picked up her phone, then set it back down without dialing. Her hands felt cold despite the warm room. Somewhere deep down, a small flicker of doubt crept in, one she quickly pushed away. She was still in control. She had to be. Meanwhile, across town, Troy's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. It was Marcus Webb, his closest friend at the terminal, someone he had worked side by side with for 6 years. "Hey man, meet me at Warehouse 9, the text read. "I think I can help you." Troy felt a small flicker of relief, warm and cautious at the same time. He drove there right, after dropping Chloe at school, watching her wave from the sidewalk in her yellow raincoat. Warehouse 9 sat empty and quiet, its metal walls groaning softly in the wind outside. Troy stepped inside, calling Marcus's name into the dim space. His voice echoed once, then faded. Something felt wrong immediately, a strange prickle at the back of his neck. A small blinking light caught his eye, tucked inside Marcus's jacket pocket, the jacket itself left open and forgotten on a wooden crate. A tracking device, small and black. Troy's pulse jumped hard in his throat. He stepped closer, careful, quiet. "You're wired," Troy said quietly, not moving from where he stood. Marcus froze near the far wall, then slowly hung his head. "Vanessa paid me $15,000, Troy. My daughter needs surgery next month. I didn't know what else to do." Silence stretched between them, heavy and long, broken only by a loose metal sheet on the roof rattling once in the wind. Troy's chest rose and fell slowly. He did not raise his voice. "You think $15,000 is worth selling out your own conscience?" Troy asked, stepping closer, his tone still even. Marcus's shoulders began to shake. Tears ran down his face, cutting clean lines through the dust and grease on his cheeks. He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, smearing the dirt further. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking apart. "Tell me how to fix this, please." Troy studied him for a long, quiet moment, weighing something behind his steady eyes. Then he nodded once, slow and certain. "Get me inside the server room Sunday night." "That's how you fix it." Marcus wiped his face with both hands and nodded back, still sniffing. A shaky, uncertain partnership had just been born between them, right there among the empty crates. Sunday night arrived cold and wet, rain hammering the terminal roof in a steady, hollow rhythm. Marcus slipped Troy a spare key card behind the loading dock, glancing over his shoulder twice as he did it. Artie had drawn a rough map of the old ventilation tunnels on a torn piece of paper. It marked a path that avoided every working camera in the building. Troy pressed the paper flat against his chest as he moved through the darkness. The air inside the tunnel smelled like rust and standing water, thick and stale. His boots splashed through shallow puddles with every careful step. Somewhere above him, a fan motor clicked on and off, on and off, a small mechanical heartbeat in the dark. Troy's own heart pounded harder with every step forward. Water dripped somewhere behind him, slow and even like a clock counting down. He pressed one hand against the cold tunnel wall to steady himself. He reached a service hatch at exactly 11:02 p.m. and eased it open slowly into the server room beyond, careful not to let the hinges squeal. Rows of blinking machines lined the walls inside, humming low and steady like sleeping giants. Troy pulled the small USB drive from his coat pocket, his fingers cold and slightly numb from the tunnel air. He knelt beside the main terminal and pushed the drive firmly into the port. The moment the light on the drive turned green, the room went completely black. Troy's breath caught hard in his chest. Heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway outside, closer, then closer still. A flashlight beam swept across the floor in a wide, searching arc. Leo Marsh stepped into the doorway, flanked by two large guards on either side. A stun baton crackled blue in his raised hand, sparking softly in the dark. "End of the line, Harrison," Leo said, his voice flat and cold as the tunnel water. Troy backed against the server rack, his palms pressed flat to the cool metal behind him. "This isn't your fight, Leo," he said quietly. "Everything here is my fight," Leo answered, stepping closer, boots crunching on scattered debris. The baton struck Troy's shoulder hard. Pain shot down his arm like lightning splitting a tree. His knees buckled, and he hit the floor hard, breath knocked clean out of his lungs. His wallet fell open beside him on the tile, a small photo of Chloe sliding out into the flashlight beam. For one heartbeat, everything went silent except the sharp ringing in his ears. Troy stared at his daughter's smiling face on the cold floor, her gap-toothed grin frozen in the old photograph. Something inside him steadied instantly, like a switch flipping in the dark. He forced his hand forward and grabbed the edge of a metal cart, blood pounding hard in his temples. Slowly, agonizingly, he pulled himself upright against the pain. Leo raised the baton again, stepping directly under a small hidden camera mounted above the doorframe. Cassius had quietly taken control of that camera 2 full days earlier. Far off, a siren wailed, faint at first, then growing steadily louder through the storm outside. Leo's confidence cracked visibly across his face. His eyes darted toward the exit door behind him. "This isn't over," he muttered, already turning to run, his 2 guards close behind him. Troy sank back against the server rack, chest heaving with every breath, and watched the upload bar finish crawling across the screen. 100% complete. Every file was safe now, locked inside Vanguard's private cloud storage. Troy sat on the cold floor a moment longer, shoulder throbbing with a deep, steady ache. He picked up Chloe's photo and pressed it flat against his chest. His hands were shaking, but his breathing slowly steadied. Somewhere above him, the sprinkler system clicked once and went silent. He pulled himself to his feet, using the server rack for support, and limped back toward the tunnel hatch. By sunrise Monday, Vanessa still had no idea who had broken into her server room overnight. To cover herself, she quickly sent a company-wide message calling Troy a thief and a vandal. She ordered every security guard in the building to stop him if he ever showed his face at Vanguard again, effective immediately. Rumors spread fast through the warehouse floor that morning. Some workers whispered that Troy had lost his mind entirely. Others said nothing at all, afraid of losing their own jobs if they took sides too loudly. The break room buzzed with quiet, nervous conversation over cold coffee. Troy read the message on his phone. That morning, sitting in his kitchen, with Chloe eating cereal beside him, milk dripping from her spoon. His jaw tightened for just a second, but he said nothing to her about it. He simply closed the phone screen and poured her a little more milk into the bowl. Outside, a sleek black car was already pulling up to the curb, sent quietly by Cassius. Inside sat a tablet holding Troy's full identity and legal standing, ready to be revealed to the world at 9 o'clock that morning. "Who's that car for?" Chloe asked, peering out the window with wide, curious eyes. "That's for Daddy, baby girl," Troy said, kissing the top of her head. "I have a big meeting today." He dropped her off with Mrs. Gable, who gave him a knowing look but asked nothing. Troy climbed into the black car, his shoulders still stiff and sore under the fresh suit Cassius had sent ahead. The driver said nothing the entire ride, just watch the road ahead. Troy stared out the window at buildings he had never once entered, as anything but a repairman. At exactly 9:15, the boardroom doors on the 45th floor swung open wide. Vanessa stood mid-sentence at the head of the table, holding a folder of falsified numbers, ready to approve another Zenith contract with a confident smile. Every board member around the long table turned toward the sudden sound. Troy walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit, the same steady, calm expression he always wore no matter the storm around him. Vanessa's smile froze halfway across her face. Her throat went dry instantly, and her fingers tightened around the folder. "Security!" she shouted, pointing a shaking finger straight at him. "Get him out of here right now." Nobody in the room moved an inch. 2 federal agents stepped forward instead, badges raised high and clear for everyone to see. "Vanessa Sinclair," one agent said firmly, "you're under arrest for embezzlement and federal tax fraud." Cassius stood calmly beside Troy and spoke clearly to the stunned, silent room. "This is Troy Harrison. He controls 51% of Vanguard Global Holdings through the Harrison Legacy Trust his father built decades ago." The folder slipped from Vanessa's trembling hands, papers scattering loudly across the polished marble floor. Her legs gave out beneath her as she dropped hard into her chair as handcuffs closed tight around both wrists. The metal clicked shut, cold and absolutely final. Every person who had once mocked Troy in the hallways now stared at him in complete silence. Vanessa's voice cracked, small and broken. "If I had known who you were, that's exactly the problem," Troy said quietly, his eyes steady on hers. "You never asked. You never once asked any of us." The room stayed frozen for a long, heavy moment. Somewhere near the tall windows, an air vent clicked softly, the only sound left hanging in the silence. One board member, an older man near the window, finally spoke up. "Mr. Harrison, on behalf of this board, we owe you a sincere apology." Troy nodded once, his face calm, betraying nothing of the storm he had walked through to reach that room. He did not gloat. He simply turned and walked toward the tall windows, looking out at the gray harbor below. It was the same water he had once driven past every single night on his way home. That afternoon, Troy returned to the Midwest terminal, dressed once again in his old, familiar work jacket. He stood on a loading platform and spoke to the workers gathered below him in the cold air. He announced full restoration of their health benefits, effective that very day. Cheers rippled through the crowd immediately. He promoted Marcus to shift supervisor, thanking him publicly for finding the courage to tell the truth when it mattered most. Marcus wiped his eyes and shook Troy's offered hand, saying nothing, needing nothing more than that simple gesture. He invited Artie back as a paid technical advisor with a salary that finally matched his decades of hard-earned skill and knowledge. The old man's eyes filled with tears he did not bother hiding from anyone watching. The workers cheered louder, their voices echoing off the tall metal walls around them. Someone started clapping near the back, and soon the whole platform joined in together, boots stomping on the concrete floor. Later, Troy drove home, through streets washed clean by melting sleet, puddles catching flashes of weak winter sunlight. The clouds finally broke apart for the first time in days, letting pale gold light spill across the wet pavement. He picked up Chloe from school and lifted her high into his arms outside the front gate, spinning her once before setting her down. "Guess what, baby girl," he said softly, brushing hair from her forehead. "We don't have to worry about rent anymore. Not ever again." Chloe just smiled, too young to fully understand the weight behind his words. She only cared that her father was smiling too, really smiling, wide and easy for the first time in a very long time. That night, Troy tucked her into bed and sat beside her a while. He listened to her breathe easy and slow, no ease at all in the quiet room. He thought about Artie's cracked notebook, about Marcus's tears in that empty warehouse, about the long, dark walk through that flooded tunnel. None of it had ever really been about the money. It had always been about keeping his word. He had made that promise to his father, to Chloe, and to every worker who had ever felt small under someone else's boot. He turned off the small lamp beside her bed and whispered into the dark room. "We kept our promise, Chloe. We protected the truth." Down the hall, he checked the small bottle of asthma medicine on the counter, now full again, paid for without a second thought. He set it beside her backpack for the morning. Tomorrow she would wake up in the same small apartment, in the same soft bed, still just his little girl. Nothing about their life would look different from the outside, but everything underneath it had changed for good. Outside, his old black SUV sat parked under a flickering streetlight. The heater had been fixed that very afternoon, and the engine sat quiet in the cold Chicago night.